8, 9 years now, and I'm the financial aid coordinator there. Next slide. So this is going to be, my goal here today is to give you just like a brief overview of kind of what it's going to look like for the next couple of months. So it's going to have, we're going to talk a little bit of just what it is when it comes to financial aid, the different types of financial aid. I'll give you guys kind of a walkthrough so you guys can get used to what it's going to start looking like when you start applying, and that'll lead into the dates and deadlines of when everything's going to open for people to start applying. So that'll be a good one to look out for. We'll have questions at the end for general questions. If you have questions that are like more specific to maybe your situation or want to go in a little more detail, we can do that after. I'll be at the Crafton Hills College booth after, and we can kind of get into a little more detail if you guys want, or whatever you guys are comfortable with. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing here is we're going to talk about kind of what financial aid is. So financial aid is money that does not have to get paid back, with them being grants and scholarships. There is some sort of funding that does get paid back, such as loans, but the idea of financial aid is to help with your post-secondary educational costs. So all of the costs that would, for like either if you go to a trade school, if you decide to go to a university or a community college, the idea of financial aid is to help you cover those costs so that you're able to focus on your education as a whole. There's different sources, so there's federal aid, there's state aid, and so what that means is federal is, these are funds that are given federally throughout the United States. There is a lot of local state aid, so for example, the state of California has a lot of grants and funds that they give to students in California. So if you happen to go to school out of state, other states, Arizona, New Mexico, they can have institutional aid as well, and their own state aid as well that you can look into if that's something that you're interested in moving towards. It can come in, like I said, it can come in different forms. It can come in grants, scholarships, loans. Some of those you do have to pay back, and I'll touch base on that shortly. So next slide, please. So for the types of financial aid, the first one and the really important one is going to be grants. So this is money that you don't have to pay back, and it's worded on a need basis. And what I mean by that is it's based off of a calculation from your financial aid. And they'll have something that they're going to call need analysis. So they're going to basically determine, based on the information that's put on the FAFSA, how much you're qualifying for, and then they use how much it costs to go to the school to determine how much your need is left. So you're going to hear a lot throughout applying, and once you're actually in institutions about what the need is. It's not necessarily like, oh, I need $500 for my textbooks. It's more what they're using to calculate how much you're going to qualify for. Some of the main ones that are like federal, which is the Pell Grant and the SCOG grant, those are offered to you, and you do not have to pay those back. The rule of thumb is if it ends with the word grant at the end, you don't have to pay it back. Next slide, please. So there's different types of financial aid, and this one I like to touch base if you're going to take or go to school here in California. So there's 3 sections. There's Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, and Cal Grant C. So Cal Grant A is going to be your first one that if you transfer straight to a 4-year and you put that information on the FAFSA, that's the amount that's listed up here is how much they would give you just for this specific grant. Just as a caveat, just remember these grants can stack, so it's not like you're only going to be able to qualify for one or the other. You'll be able to stack these to fit what they'll call as your need. That's what Cal Grant A is. Cal Grant B is going to be for your like community colleges and some of the trade schools too. So for example, if you decided to go to Crafton and you qualified for the Cal Grant, you would get the Cal Grant B there. And you notice that the funds are different, the amounts are different. It does depend on the university and community college that you go to. Cal Grant C is for like the vocational programs. So if you're looking at going into like a respiratory radiology programs at community colleges, that's what the Cal Grant C would fall under. Next slide, please. This next one is one of my favorites, which is the federal work study, because it is funds that are awarded to you, but you actually have to work either most likely on campus to get these funds. So they'll most likely hire you as a student on campus. like the campus bookstores or throughout any of the departments, and you would use, they would give you these funds, but they are paid through a federal work study grant. So that's something great to kind of look out for if you want to get really involved in your campuses to one, help with, work experience, but also you get paid through this funds through the financial aid. Next slide. So the next one we're going to talk about is loans. So when it comes to loans, this is money that you have to pay back. The students would apply for it. It's money that essentially the government will lend the student to pay for their college expenses, separate from grants. Usually what most colleges will do is they'll award you all of what we call the free money, so grants and scholarships first. And then if you need still funds additional to cover the cost of tuition or housing and stuff like that, that's when you can look into taking out loans. There are additional steps when it comes to taking out loans, for example, like the master promissory notes. So those are things that you have to look out when it comes to you actually enrolling and determining the cost when you transfer. So it says up there the terms may vary significantly by the program because it does determine, there are different amounts. So for example, your freshman and sophomore year, there's a specific amount that they'll let you borrow through the loan program. And there's programs that allow the student to borrow a certain amount of money, but then there's other programs that allow the parents to come in and help the student and the parents taking out loans, which I'll touch base on in a second. And that's why I say the terms kind of may vary. And these loans do have to get paid back. So kind of the main rule of thumb too with the loans is take them as you need them, try to not go over it. A lot of colleges nowadays offer like workshops and stuff before you take out the loans to kind of give you this information right before you take it out, just like as a refresher of like, hey, this is exactly what you're signing up for. So I always recommend kind of contacting your guys' financial aid departments when you go to these schools and see what kind of information or workshops they can offer before you take out the loans. It just kind of depends on where you go to apply and go to school. The next slide, please. So this is kind of just a bigger breakdown of the loans. So we have the first main one, which is the direct subsidized loans. These are for students with financial needs. So there's that word need again that I was talking about, that you can't go over the cost of what it costs to go to school there. They can't give you over that amount. So let's say, for example, it costs $20,000 to go to the school per year, but you're trying to borrow $25,000 worth, they won't let you because of the need is only $20,000. That's just kind of like a very generic overview. There is a fixed interest rate of, currently, it does sometimes change yearly, at 6.53. So that's what it would be at. That interest starts after you graduate for the subsidized. For the unsubsidized, so those are available to anybody. So when it comes to those, they will give you as much as you request for the most part. This interest is a little different because this does start accruing interest right when you start taking out the loans. So that's kind of the big difference between two. The subsidized loans don't start accruing interest until you actually graduate. The second one, the unsubsidized, they start taking them accruing interest right when you take them out the first time. So that's just something to keep in mind. Most schools will let you, for example, they'll give you your entire award package, and then they'll say, okay, here's all of the free money, so here are all your grants. You can go in and accept those first. Then it'll let you accept subsidized and then unsubsidized. Kind of trying to follow that order so that way you leave the unsubsidized until the end, because that's the one that will start accruing the interest like right from when you take it out. So I would just keep that kind of in mind when it comes to the loans themselves. And that one also does have a fixed rate of 6.53. Next slide. Okay, so this is the direct plus for the parents. So this is how I mentioned that the parents can also take out loans to cover some of the students' expenses. So for example, let's say there's an unexpected housing for the student that they need additional loans for. These loans are under the parents' names, but they go for the student's account. So these are a little different. They are eligible for if the student goes into like a graduate or like med school or anything like that, like the parents can contribute, but these do fall under the parents' accounts. So if you, under the Parent Plus loan, take it out for the student, it's not the student's responsibility to pay it back, it would fall under you, because it will be under your account. Just as a caveat there. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I would recommend taking a picture of this screen right here because it has a couple of websites. The biggest thing that I always like to encourage is scholarships. Scholarships are money that you don't have to pay back. The most you have to do is submit some sort of application and then maybe write a thank you letter after you get the funds. We use a lot the fasfa. Basically on there you can type in and search different types of scholarships that are available for the students. So for all of these incoming seniors, you might want to start looking at these within the next couple months because they'll actually start awarding people for the 25-26 school year, so the year that you'll be a freshman, they'll start awarding those throughout this year. And then they'll give you the funds when you start school next year in August or September. So I would just try to keep out, kind of rule of thumb with these is if you have to pay for the scholarship application, I don't recommend submitting it. They shouldn't charge you to apply for a scholarship. I always like to throw shout outs to like local foundations, local church groups, or any local businesses sometimes like to offer scholarships. So I always recommend to just do your research when it comes to doing those. I know on Crafton's website, under the scholarship section, we do have some already there that are external, so that way you guys can actually go in, even if you're not a Crafton student, and apply for some of these, because they're just from like local organizations. We have some from like SoCal Edison that we like to promote because you don't have to be going into a community college. You could be going to a four-year university, private university, and then they'll be able to award these. So I like to really emphasize on the scholarships. You'd be surprised how many people don't apply for these, especially like us here at Crafton. We have a lot of the scholarships that we offer. Sometimes we'll have like one or two people apply for specific scholarships. And if there's 2 awards, then that means both of them get it just for applying. So you'd be surprised how many students will start it but not submit it. So rule of thumb, just spend 1 afternoon a week trying to submit these applications for the scholarships because you'd be surprised how much you can get from these scholarships. Next slide. Okay, so I'm gonna start now like a little bit of a walkthrough. There's gonna be a lot of screenshots on here. I like to kind of do this part because you'll at least start to see what it looks like. So this is the first homepage that you'll land on, which is the student aid one. Right now, the 24-25 application is open. So once the next school year opens, it'll say 25-26, and then you'll be able to click on start new form. I always kind of start there just because it's the easiest to kind of start at. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so right here, you'll be directed to this part right here where it lets you log in. So if you have never created a FAFSA account, and this is going to be for the student and the parent, you'll click on where it says create an account on the bottom. The account that you create, you only have to create it once. For the parents, if you have any siblings that are, not siblings, if you have any children who have already gone to college, they might have already created you an account. The account is associated with your social security number, so they can't, your second kid can't make another account. So just try to communicate if you have siblings, because you might already have an account. For the parents who do not have social security numbers, you can also create an account. It does have a little bit of a longer verification process, but it is something that is able to happen. We can assist you guys with that as well because it is a little bit of a tedious process, but everyone essentially that's in FAFSA now has to have an ID. So just keep in mind that. I do recommend that if you don't have an ID as of right now, go on and just make one and have it ready so that way when the FAFSA application comes, your information's already been verified. It'll save you guys a lot of time down the road so that way you don't have to take longer with the applications, and it kind of saves you time and it saves the students time down the road. Next slide, please. All right, so right when you go into the landing page after you sign in and starting, these are the 4 things that are going to pop up. They'll pop up individually, but essentially they're going to give you little videos of what's kind of the process, who has to go on the applications. It's going to talk about contributors. So for some of the students, you as the parents would be considered the contributors on there. It'll even guide you on who has to go on there, so there'll be questions for that. And that's what these kind of 4 videos do, is they just kind of give you like a, hey, this is kind of what's going to happen while you do the application and what's going to happen kind of after. Next slide, please. All right, so right when you go in, either as a student, it's going to ask you to consent. So it's going to give you this long list of terms and conditions, and then you're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you're going to have to approve. This is kind of the important part, because if the student or the parent doesn't consent, they will not give you any federal aid. So that's no loans, no grants, nothing through the Department of Education. So you can submit it without consenting, but they won't actually award the student anything. So just keep that in mind. And that'll be the first page that pops up right after you go into the actual application. Next slide, please. So this next part is going to be for your personal circumstances for the student. So it asks, each of these bullets are basically what the tabs are going to be asking you for. So it'll ask for like the student's marital status, what their college or career goals is. This part is important for the seniors because, for example, when you put on there that you're transferring to a 4-year, the state of California, when they try to award you the Cal Grant, they'll use this information on this part right here as like, oh, he can be eligible for Cal Grant A. Or if you put that you're interested in going to a community college, they'll try to award you Cal Grant B. So this is a part where I know sometimes if you're undecided, it can get a little tricky. But rule of thumb is just kind of go with your gut when it comes to the for the student's college or career school choice. There's going to be 2 last sections which talks about other circumstances or unusual circumstances. So for the other and the unusual, these are for students who are either students who are either unaccompanied homeless youths who are unable to provide the parents' information. Or the last part is if parents are unable to provide the information to go on the FAFSA. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to put students in harm's way or in any uncomfortable situations when it comes to submitting the application. So this part, the parent won't see. This is all still under the student's part. Next. So this right here is a question that it's going to ask you. And it's one of those double negative questions. It's basically asking if the parents are unwilling to provide their information. It'll auto default to no, and that's okay because it's saying essentially that you are willing to provide your information if you are. If for some reason they switch this to yes, that's basically the student saying that the parents are unwilling to give the information and all they want is loans. And it'll offer them only the loans that they're able to get by themselves. So for this one, rule of thumb, just keep it as no, if the parents are able to still put the information on there. Next slide, please. So this is going to be where it's going to ask the student, this is on the student side, it's going to ask them a series of questions regarding their parents. So if after all these questions they still determine that the parents have to go on the FAFSA, it's going to ask them these questions. It's going to ask them if they're married, if they're living in the same household. Basically, it's kind of like a questionnaire to determine which parent has to go on the application. By the end, it's going to, after you hit continue, next slide please. It's going to give you this landing page over here that's on the left. So essentially the student's going to need your first and last name, date of birth, social, and an email. I usually recommend them to use the email that you put on your FAFSA ID account that you created, so that way it links it automatically. Because essentially they have to send the parent an invite. The way the FAFSA is now is where the student can only submit their part and the parent actually has to go in and do their part. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a sec. So the students will know that the invitation went through because it'll say invite sent, and then it'll have the parent's name on there. Okay, so after the invitation gets sent, it'll go on to the student demographics. Caveat, if the student doesn't invite either of the parents, it won't let them continue to this section. So it will leave them stuck under putting the parent contributor part. So they have to put a parent on there and hit continue and have the invite actually go through before it gets into this next part. It doesn't let them move forward. So just make sure to have that information before you start. So it's always first and last name, date of birth, and social if you have it. If you don't have a social security number, it's the address that you have on your account on the FAFSA. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just kidding. Can you go back one more? Okay, yeah. So after you send the invite, it's going to ask for the student demographics. This part doesn't affect your eligibility. These are just research-based questions that they use. So it's like gender, race, citizenship status, educational status, and if the parents were killed in the line of duty. So with, most of these questions are just research-based, and a lot of them have the option of prefer not to answer. If you're not comfortable answering the questions, feel free to put prefer not to answer, or reach out to the high school, reach out to the college that you're interested in going to, and they can kind of help you answer some of these questions. Next slide. Okay, so then it's going to talk about the student's assets. So when it comes to the actual tax income, it's going to ask for 2023 tax income for the 25-26 school year. So it'll say 2023 student assets. And if there is no assets, you can just put 0. Rule of thumb, if you don't know, or if there isn't an amount, you can put 0. I know sometimes people think that they're not allowed to put 0, but you can. Because it's going to ask if you own real estate and stuff like that. If the student doesn't own any real estate, then they can put 0. That's okay. Next question, or next slide. Okay, so this is going to be where you're going to put all of the colleges that you want to receive your FAFSA application. You can put up to 20 schools. Side note, you're allowing to, when you're sending this through, you're allowing these X amount of schools to process your financial aid information and essentially give you an award letter. That doesn't mean you're getting into the school, that just means that they are processing your financial aid package. You can put all 20 schools and send them off. The only school that's actually going to pay you funds is the school that you actually registered to and actually enroll in courses to. So just keep that in mind. So if you put 2 different schools on here and you enroll at both, you might run into some issues because you cannot get federal aid at 2 schools at the same time. So just keep that in mind when you list all of the schools that you wish to get this application. Next slide. So that'll basically be the last part for the students, because you'll get to this landing page and then it's going to ask you to sign your application. The key thing here is that after this, you're not done. Can you go to the next slide? So this is what it's going to look like after the student signs it. You're going to see in the bottom, it's going to have, if you put both parents on there, it'll have both of their names and it'll say invite sent. The key thing is the student's financial aid FAFSA application is not submitted until the parents have done their part as well. So let's say I'm the student and I got to this part, I invited my parents, and that was it. I don't have a completed FAFSA application. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Okay, so now on to kind of the parents part. So when the student fills out the parent information and sends the invite, this is the email that you guys are, as the parents, are going to get. It's basically going to say the name of the student, and it's going to say that they need help with their FAFSA application. You can either follow the link, and if you don't have an account, you can create an account then and there, or if you already have an account, you'll be able to log in. Can you go to the next slide? So this is what, once you're logged in your dashboard, this is the notification it's going to give you, or one kind of similar that says the student's name needs help with the application, and it'll ask you to accept the invitation. Once you actually accept the invitation, there's just a couple of things that you're going to need to do. Next slide, please. So the first thing you're going to have to do is consent, just like the student did. excuse me. And if what you're consenting to, which is basically this long list of things here, is basically allowing them to use your information to determine how much the student is eligible for. So they'll automatically transfer the IRS tax information over, and that way you don't have to manually fill it out. There are some instances where parents have to manually fill it out. It usually depends. Sometimes, like if you amended your taxes, or the most up-to-date information isn't with the IRS, it can cause it to have you to manually input the information. But you do have to consent on this part. Can you go to the next slide, please? So if you don't consent on that screen, you're going to keep getting these notifications. It's going to say over and over again, provide consent, because technically you don't have to provide consent if you don't want to, but then the student's not going to be eligible for financial aid even if they consented. So the main thing is once you provide consent, you won't keep getting the pop-ups, but if you don't, it will keep popping up and asking you to consent while you're filling out the application on the parent section. So like I said, the parents part is only like 3 main parts. The first one's providing consent, and then the next one is, can you go to the next slide? It's going to be the demographic questions. So it's just going to ask for your current marital status and then your legal residence status. So if you've been living in California for X amount of years, that's what you'll put on there. The next slide. The next part is going to be for the parents' finances, and so that's a list of the things that it's going to ask you for, because those weren't transferred over. When it comes to the parents' number in college, they don't use that for anything. It's more for research-based questions. So if you have 2 kids in college, then you will put 2. If let's say you as a parent and the student are going to college, on the student's application you'll put 1, but then on your application if you're taking classes, you would put 2. And then it asks for like assets and stuff like that. All of this information, when you provide consent, well, better said, most of this information will transfer over from the IRS when you provide the consent, and it might not even ask you for all of these. I just kind of like to list it out just so you can have an idea of what you potentially will get asked while doing this application. Next slide. So then lastly, you'll get to the sign and submit page. So technically you as the parent can submit it if all the student needed was for you to submit the application. It'll give you the option to sign and submit. Once you select sign and submit, the student will get an email that says, hey, your parent did their application and your application as a whole has been submitted. Can you go to the next slide, please? That's kind of the entire FAFSA application, like from A to Z of what to expect while you're doing the application. Essentially what you'll do after that is contact the school that you're actually going to go to and find out what their financial aid process is. So if you are ineligible to submit the FAFSA application, you can submit the DREAM Act application if you fall under these categories listed above. You can still apply for state aid that the state of California can give you. That is a separate application. It's through the California DREAM Act application, and it kind of follows the same questions. It asks the same tax questions and stuff like that. So it kind of will mirror the FAFSA for the most part. Next slide, please. We're all set. Okay, cool. So this is going to be an important one if you want to take a picture of it too. It's going to be the dates and deadlines for completing the applications. So when it says deadlines on there, they're not actual hard deadlines when it comes to doing the application. So for example, the deadline for March 2nd that's posted on here, that's for students that are going to go to the university that want to be eligible for the Cal Grant. So you saw the Cal Grant award that we had shown earlier. If you do it after March 2nd, there's a chance that you're not eligible for it. So just keep that in mind. So you'll hear a lot, oh, March 2nd deadline, try to do it before March 2nd. It's because we want the state of California to be able to give you as much funds as we can. Let's say you go on March 3rd to do it, and you're still going to go for your university. You still can get financial aid, and there's still a lot you can qualify for. You just might not qualify for the Cal Grant awards. So just to keep that in the back of your mind. For community colleges, we do have a little bit more time. We have until September 3rd because of our enrollment and how things are a little bit different. They give us a little bit more time. As of right now, as of today, they're saying it is posted, better said, that as of December 1st, the FAFSA application will be open. That's what we're hoping for. So you'll start seeing those emails and notifications from the high school counselors and a lot of the social media announcements. I know that was a lot of information. Can you go to the next slide? That's it. I know, it's just like we're vomit of information, but the idea is at least to get an overview of what it's going to look like and what kind of the main things are. Does anybody have general questions? Yes. That would be per year, yes.